So today, DnF Duel was announced, and everyone's going crazy because it's a new fighter from ArcSys Works, the makers of Guilty Gear. But me and my friend Horseplay are going crazy because it's a freaking dungeon fighter fighting game. And better still, the Bloody Roar devs are involved. Yeah, a lot of people miss this, but aiding is credited at the end. As Bloody Roar fans, that's super exciting for us, as they haven't done a new fighter since that Zoids one on Switch, and the one we didn't get, I mean. But we'll get back to my excitement over aiding in a minute. I think I need to explain what Dungeon Fighter is and why this is exciting. So Dungeon Fighter, or rather Dungeon and Fighter, is a Korean MMO beat-em-up, the first of its kind as far as I know, that officially released in 2005, though I think it was in beta as far back as 2003. Either way, the game is old and successful, often called the most popular MMO in the world with over 600 million players back in 2015. Its origins are actually kinda silly. See, the developers, Neopal, were a small company that made some Flash and mobile games and the like, and when they saw the success of MapleStory, they said, hey, what if we did MapleStory but cool? So they made Dungeon & Fighter, whose name is literally a combination of Dungeons & Dragons and Street Fighter. Originally, it had 3 characters, Slayer, Fighter, and Gunner. It was supposed to run for like a year or two, get played, and then they shut it down. Instead, the servers were instantly overflowed in the beta, and the game has now been running for around 15 years now, and is, again, called the most popular MMO in the world. However, that mostly comes from the Asian releases. The game came out in Korea, China, and then Japan as Eredsenki, and even managed to get a silly anime called Eredsenki Slap-Up Party. However, the West got kinda screwed. See, I remember this game being talked about on fighting game message boards and just utterly drooling over it. In fact, it was this 12-year-old YouTube combo video right here that sold me. Look at it. Combos in an MMORPG. Yeah, like I said, D&D meets Street Fighter. You actually do quarter circles to do special moves and shit. And as you level up, you get more moves and the move list gets super huge. You can do sick combos. There's even competitive PvP tournaments. Oh man, it looked cool. I remember getting a VPN just to play the Japanese version on dial-up, because the Korean one requires a KSSN number to be played, and I could not wait for a US release. Alas, I had to. It took nearly 5 years for this game to get a US release. See, Neopal had been holding DnF World tournaments, but the world was Korea, Japan, and China. That's kinda lame. They wanted to spread the game all over the world, but Neopal just did not have the resources. So they merged with Nexon, and one of their conditions was that Nexon would handle the global release of Dungeon & Fighter, now called Dungeon Fighter Online, or DFO. And they bungled it. DFO was barely advertised. It was released at the same time as Nexon's in-house Vindictus, a very pretty 3D beat-em-up MMO that was a lot flashier and took less skill to play. I mean, no offense, but we're basically comparing Shadow over Mystara, the MMO, to Dynasty Warriors, the MMO. I love me some Dynasty Warriors, but that doesn't use quarter circles. On top of Vindictus being newer, prettier, easier, and better advertised, DFO was also horribly mishandled. They said they wanted to give the US a unique experience. Yeah, never do that. So you see, Korea actually has laws to prevent anyone from playing too much of an MMO. So Dungeon & Fighter has a built-in limit on how much you can play per day, the fatigue bar. They knew this wouldn't fly with Westerners, so they removed it. But to counterbalance that, they more than doubled the amount of XP needed to level up. And this caused players to run out of quests and turn the game that wasn't overly grindy at all into a slow, grindy slog. Oof. They also chose the Japanese gacha-style monetization over the Korean normal-ass cash shop monetization, among many, many other missteps. DFO was done dirty, and after about 2 years, though it was more like 1.5 years as the second Christmas update, they just stopped updating after that. Well, the game was shut down. I waited 5 years for this game. It finally comes out, is horribly mishandled, and then gets shut down after only 2 years. Great. Sadly, DFO had no real alternatives. There were very few beat-em-up MMOs, and none were as good as DFO. Sorry, Rusty Hearts. Worse yet, the European release never made it out of beta. Way to hold up your end of the bargain there, Nexon! But a year later, Neopal ran a test to see if there was any interest in the West, and sure enough there was. Thus, they decided to try and bring DFO back themselves. Neopal, who had never hosted their own servers before, would host the global servers over in Korea. These servers would be non-region locked and staffed by a small crew of about 10 people. It was about 2 or 3 years after the shutdown of DFO that the game finally came back and has thus far remained online since. Yeah, you can still play this. They even put it on Steam. Now, mind you, the global server population is kinda small and located primarily at endgame. You'll want to bring a crew. Also, the game is now identical to the Asian version, so no gacha for the most part. Let's not talk about rare avatars. And there is a fatigue system. My advice, make a bunch of characters. Each character has a separate fatigue meter. DFO has a ton of classes, and they each have subclasses, which all play very differently. Also, remember that male and female versions of characters are completely different for the most part. The gunners are the most similar, followed by the fighters. Everyone else is wildly different. Also, if you like boxers, go priest, then go monk. Sorry, this turned less into what is Dungeon Fighter and why is it awesome, and more, why have I never heard of this supposed most popular MMO in the world? Then again, what else do I need to say about why Dungeon Fighter is awesome? It's a 2D beat-em-up MMO with sick combos. But let's dive a little more into the game itself. The lore? There's a lot of it. Like, the world's been rebooted twice now. Seriously, world ended, they changed every single map for a post-apocalyptic world, then everyone missed the old world, so we went back in time to save it. Now DFO is like a retooling of the original world with the post-apocalyptic world as another dimension. There's a lot of stuff, and I barely know any of it, to be honest. Just know that in Dungeon Fighter, it's the rule of cool that matters. Nearly anything is allowed, the world is called Arid, and demons come from New York. No, seriously, the Earth was literally exploded by war, and a big piece of New York has been floating through space, and everyone else evolved into some kind of demon-y thing, I think? The mages come from there. Alright, and the world has an upper and lower level divided by a sea in the middle of the sky that a giant whale swims through, and the upper world is called Empyrean. It has more advanced technology, and that's where gunners come from, and yeah, DFO is crazy. Actually, though, the main thing I should mention is how characters work, as that's actually relevant to the fighting game, potentially. See, you don't play as a named character, you play as a generic class, like Slayer, Fighter, Mage, and so on. They all have backstories, but they're supposed to be your character, and you customize them with Cash Shop avatar parts. It's a free-to-play game. But once you reach level 15, you choose one of about 4 different subclasses to play as, which completely changes their fighting style. So if you play a male priest and become a monk as your subclass, you plunge your giant cross into the ground and become a boxer, while the cross gives you buffs. If your male priest becomes an Avenger, though, they specialize in scythes and transform into a demon. There are 14 base classes with 4 or 5 subclasses each. It is highly plausible that the base roster for DnF Duel will be 1 representative for each of the 14 classes. But, as every subclass uses the same base body model, with all female mages being pointy-eared lollies and all male priests being swole buff dudes and so on, it's also possible that we may see subclasses used to boost the roster like crazy. As of right now, there are 59 different subclasses and then 2 special bonus classes no one uses. It would be very interesting if they decide to take advantage of the subclass system to make the roster huge. It also makes me wonder if will be any customization elements to the game. I understand it is very hard to do alternate outfits with the way ArcSys does their visuals, with not only each frame hand pose, but the lighting on each frame hand pose. That's the secret to ArcSys' superior cell shading, custom lighting on every frame of animation. So that would make alternate skins and outfits tricky, but maybe not impossible. They may have ideas on how to pull that off, and this would be a good testing ground for such an idea. We've gotten a little of that with Vidal's alternate hairstyles and the censored and uncensored outfits in Grand Blue that you unlock by beating story mode. Sorry, I'm dreaming here, but that's a big maybe. Unfortunately, as I have been out of the DFO loop for a while, I can't really give you any in-depth breakdowns on what I see in the trailer. But everyone's favorite witch main, Clearandsweet, can, and I highly recommend checking out his video for more information when it comes to what skills and classes are seen in the trailer. Now, as for aiding the makers of Bloody Roar, yes, they are still in business, so quit going, oh man, it would be so cool if they got, like, Namco to make a new Bloody Roar. Fuck Namco. Bloody Roar is better than Tekken and Soul Calibur combined. What? Yes, I am a fanboy. What of it? So what has been going on with aiding? Well, after Bloody Roar flopped, the series was never really successful despite being incredible, they were hired to make a Naruto fighting game called Naruto Gekito Ninja Taisen, or Naruto Ninja Council when it finally came to the West. They really just recycled the Bloody Roar Primal Fury engine, and it was a huge success. They made a ton of entries in the series on GameCube and Wii, and even got some recognition within the FGC, more than poor Bloody Roar ever did. They would then make a ton of licensed fighters on GameCube, Wii, and PSP, including a Zatch Bell fighter, a series of Bleach fighters called Bleach Heat the Soul, Fate Unlimited codes, the Kamen Rider Climax series, Castlevania Judgment, Kenichi, the World's Strongest Disciple, Zoid's Struggle and Zoid's Full Metal Crash, Full Metal Alchemist, Battle Carnival, and Battle Stadium DON, to name just a few. Eventually, they would be tapped by Capcom, who had pretty much fired almost their entire fighting game staff at this point, to make Tatsunoko vs. Capcom and then Marvel vs. Capcom 3. This would be the best example of their 2.5D fighters, and I beg of you not to judge on MVC3 alone, as if you ask me, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom is much better. Alas, this is where the troubles start. Aiding and Dimps were the real MVPs of licensed fighters, and at their peak, Aiding made as many as 7 licensed fighting games in a single year. Alas, they were all on GameCube and Wii. They were all still using the Primal Fury engine. Now, mind you, they were wizards with that engine. We had Dimps saying that 2.5D Darkstalkers would be impossible because the then current technology couldn't handle the morphing limbs, only for Aiding to pull off Morrigan on Wii. They would also later do Senko and Felicia on 360 and PS3. But MVC3 was their first HD outing, and since then, production has slowed to a crawl. They've been kept in business making Kamen Rider games and helping with porting and the like, even worked on that Switch Kirby game, and I mentioned they worked on the Switch Zoids fighter that didn't get a US release, though it was incredibly unimpressive. They also helped out with porting Pikmin 3 to the Switch. I won't lie, I've been worried about them. Enough that I actually Google Translate their tweets and news to find out they currently have a deal with a Japanese university to funnel graduates into their company. So for better or for worse, they're taking on a lot of new blood. Trust me, that's got some pros and cons. So seeing their logo on this Dungeon Fighter trailer has me very excited. Good chance they'll be handling the gameplay while ArcSys does the graphics. I say this because ArcSys is kind of busy with Guilty Gear Strive as well as supporting Dragon Ball FighterZ and Grand Blue, so you know. Aiding's assistance will be handy, and they are definitely a company I think could do good. This also explains why they're doing DFO. I know a lot of people are shouting, when's ArcSys gonna do a fighter based on my favorite anime, JoJo, Yu Yu Hakusho, My Hero Academia, and those are big undertakings. Also, ArcSys flat out said they're not doing JoJo because they feel they could never top the Capcom fighter. That was a thing they said once. But knowing how big of a deal Dungeon & Fighter is in Asia, as well as the fact that this is a joint production with Aiding, possibly in the same way Kill la Kill was with that one upstart company, well, now it makes more sense. Also, it has got to be said that DFO and ArcSys are a match made in heaven. That game has a ton of fighting game references. Soul Bad Guy clearly inspired the Slayer character, and I mean, there's even a song used in PvP that sounds a lot like May's theme, Blue Water, Blue Sky. So yeah, that said, I will say a PC release is 98% likely. See, it needs to be understood that Japan does not play games on PC unless it's porn. It's kind of a cultural thing that needs a lot of explanation, but it runs deep. Japan may be slowly warming up to PCs, but you cannot expect them to instantly switch to it. Gaming culture in Japan is very different, and PC gaming is actually not superior to them. That said, Korea does not play games on console. It's also a cultural thing, though it's mostly because most game consoles come from Japan, and Korea holds a fucking grudge. While they've been slowly bridging the gap between their countries, old habits die hard, and Korea's entire gaming culture is based around PC gaming and internet cafes. Thus, it's all but guaranteed that there will be a PC release, especially as the game is called DnF Duel and not like the Japanese Arid Duel or something. Either way, Hopefully that gives you a little more information about this new game and why we're hyped for it. Remember, you can always just download Dungeon Fighter Online and give it a spin. It's right there. It's free. Oh, and one last side note. Apparently they are working on a 3D version of Dungeon Fighter. I think the game loses a little of its charm without being side-scrolling, but it does still look very combo-y as all heck, so I'll hope for the best. Anyway, this is Gel, and you've been game babbled, I guess. Christ, this was spontaneous and I did it in a day. See ya!
The heroes from Arad, called the Adventurers. Slayers, a unique type of swordsman filled with the source of the foreign energy in one arm, overcoming the pain of curse and evil itself. They slay their enemies with the swordsmanship that goes beyond the human limits. Fighters, martial arts specialists who constantly push their bodies to the limits and control the power of Nen. They are the ones who have truly reached the acme of Suju martial arts. Gunners, by studying guns, machines, and bombs, which are the products of the advanced Imperium technology, they have successfully developed their own ways of fighting. Mages, spiritual explorers who have been researching the wonders of mana for a very long time. They are the last bastions of Pandemonium. Priests, warriors who create miracles out of deep, true religious faith. They have always defended Arad from countless threats. Thieves, Fenes, a secret and mysterious kingdom of the Black Elves. Their sophisticated way of fighting often inspires other tribes and species. People who have crossed time, Dark Knight, Creator, children who have been stuck inside a vortex of time due to a cruel experiment have now appeared in Arad as valiant warriors that can cross the limits of time. Knights, warriors who cross dimensional borders to correct the order of the universe. They may look like innocent girls, but they are destined warriors who have a bigger heart than anyone else. Demonic Lancers, warriors who have executed their friends with their own hands for freedom. They have entered the road of adventures and challenges to erase their heavy karma. And finally, the Agents. With new tactics that combines guns and swords, they are at the center of battles. I think it's about time now. Are you all ready? Today, the history of Pandemonium will be rewritten.